Hi, everyone. So glad you're able to join us today for this session. I'm here with Darrel Branch, who is another individual that sits on the Management Advisory Board for JMU and the College of Business. He and I are joined today by Jen Mitchell, who is curious as to how an alum could become a guest speaker for class. And we're also going to be answering some questions that she may have as to what does that look like. So I wanted to start with Darrel and maybe introducing yourself, Darrel, and talking about your journey back to JMU.
Okay, yeah. So my name is Darrel Branch. I am a graduate in 1991, a marketing major out of the business school. My career has been primarily in corporate marketing. I was actually recruited out of JMU to work for Procter & Gamble, and then went on to work for other companies like Revlon and Coca-Cola, and retired. I know people say, well, how do you retire? I'm so young, but I had a good ride in corporate America and did some really great things there. And so wanted to do something on my own and now own a little boutique marketing company, almost like a marketing strategy company. My corporate career has taken me all over the country, actually all over the world. So although I was in Virginia for JMU when my parents were there, then they moved to another state. Once I graduated, I ended up pursuing my career across the country. So didn't spend a whole bunch of time back in Harrisonburg. About 6 years ago, got connected with some folks on the JMU development side. They found out I was in Florida. They came down and said, hey, we heard you've been doing some interesting things in your corporate career and as an entrepreneur, we'd love you to come back and speak to the entrepreneurship school and give your story. So I went back and gave my story of how I sort of progressed from an undergrad to JMU to a corporate executive at Coca-Cola to then being an entrepreneur. And it was very, very, very rewarding to talk with kids. I say kids because we're older now, so they all, seem like kids to me. But it was a great way to bring me back to Harrisonburg because I'd been so sort of, focused on other parts of the country. I hadn't had a chance to get back to Virginia, and primarily being in South Florida for about 20 years. It's not easy to get to Harrisonburg. So I will say it was worth the trip. And so once I was able to meet with a couple of students and then speak to a couple of classes, it sort of sucked me back in. I got the JMU fever again, wanted to give back to the university that was so instrumental in my foundation of my career, in my training, and my development. And that sort of led me to being involved in several different organizations, from being part of the cheerleading alumni to the JMU Foundation Board to the management board. So it's been a great way to sort of ground me back into the foundation that started it all. I found speaking to the students, especially in the entrepreneurship school, was very rewarding because it felt like I was able to answer some real world questions that they may not have gotten in class, but also help close the gap of what we've learned in school and how you can apply it into the real world. So if anybody's interested, I think you should definitely pursue it. It's definitely worth your time. You'll find yourself back in that mindset of being a JMU student, no matter what year you were there, and falling back into the love of that campus, and that's cool. So.
Thank you, Darrel. So what I think is cool is that I remember seeing Darrel as a cheerleader out on the field, and we were not friends back in JMU. We're a couple years different, but I was so happy to come back home, as I like to call it, and get reconnected with Darrel through the advisory board in management. And so my journey is actually eerily similar to Darrel's. I did end up in South Florida for a stint. I wasn't as smart as him. I didn't stay down where it was warm. I stayed back up in Northern Virginia somehow through work. But after graduating JMU in 1994, actually not as a business major. So I am a arts and letters communication major. And yet all of my experience in business led me to reconnect with the College of Business through, much like Darrel, a friend who said, hey, maybe you should, come back and donate your time and talents to the university, to which I had never been asked. I didn't know what that looked like. I was a little trepidatious as to putting together, a plan for teaching students. I didn't know how in depth that was going to be. But it turns out that all the years of corporate experience, and I spent 22 years in the lane of med tech. So I was working in the medical device industry, primarily in a sales capacity and sales leadership, prior to 9 years ago, entering into entrepreneurship as well. And since then, building one business, Cobalt Settlements. I am CEO of another one of my businesses, Women on Course, and then finally launching Turn Mentoring this year. So I guess serial entrepreneur is a title I can add to the resume. But what it all means is it's a lot of fun. Mostly it's a lot of experience that can be translated back to the classroom to support the students on their ventures as they move forward. So now I sit as the chair for the advisory board for management. I'm a woman for Madison. And I also do guest lecturing and guest speaking at the university when opportunities arise and they need somebody. So we wanted to demystify what it's like to go back to JMU, what the town is like. Where do you stay? Do you still have to stay at Hojo's, or are there better places to stay? Who do you connect with? How can you donate your time and talent? So Jen, I'm sure you might have some questions because you saw our survey, you answered the call. And so I want to make sure that we make this more about how can we answer your questions and hopefully get you plugged back into the university.
Thank you. I was really wondering, so I'm a graduate from 1998. I did graduate from the business school with a concentration in human resources. And I actually have a child at JMU now. And so I've been lucky enough to actually get to go back fairly often. My questions really are around, like, how do you get plugged in? How I've been in human resources for my entire career, going back to 98. So I have a lot of experience in that realm. I actually am involved with the alumni down here, and I've been doing some work around resumes and interviewing and all those sorts of things to help new grads and alumni who are trying to change careers or find a new employer. So I really was just curious on how I get plugged in. How do I know what opportunities are out there and what they're looking for speaking opportunities at JMU? Just those sorts of general questions.
Great.
Hey, Jim, before we go to the answers to your questions, so where are you located again? Just give us.
I'm down in Raleigh, North Carolina.
You're in Raleigh, okay, because I wasn't sure if you're in Virginia. Got it. Okay, good.
Still pretty close.
Yeah, not far. Yeah.
So I'll kick it off, and Darrell, I'd love for you to add in. You know, with the advent of Zoom, that's one of the reasons why Darrell and I thought it would be great to do this, is because you don't need to be in Harrisonburg to help support a class. And a lot of these students are adept to seeing people on Zoom. They have the cameras in class, especially in College of Business. It's such a new venue that they have all the latest and greatest tech. So people can be broadcasted in from anywhere, which is wonderful. And as far as how you can get connected, so you're starting here. Now that we know you have an interest, Darrell and I are going to move your name to the faculty that serve on our advisory board, specifically faculty that have the interest of the HR concentration, since that's your background. Once you get plugged into one, you get plugged into many. So I think that's where it all starts. So we'd be happy to help you along on that journey. Darrell, any comments as to, you know?
Yeah, a couple questions for you, Jen. So what kind of focus in HR is your background, and what kind of things would you want to talk about? Because then that gives us an idea of how we can sort of, you know, put your name in the right direction. Because the good news about JMU is the faculty is very open to people coming back and speaking and giving back. So they just want to know where you kind of fit best. So that would help us understand on our end.
Oh, yeah. So I've worked for the last, I've worked in several different industries. I'm actually back in healthcare. I work for Mass General Brigham up in the Boston area for their corporate office. So I'm back in healthcare. But I've previously worked in, for NC State University and the SAS Institute. So healthcare, tech, and higher ed are really the primary groups that I've worked for. I've spent time in benefits, payroll, technology. It's been a long time since I've done recruiting, but I did used to do recruiting.
Right.
So most of what my focus has really been on is the integration of technology into human resources. So setting up the right systems so that we can support our employees the best way
Got
possible.
it.
I was brought back to Mass General Brigham because of my experience in implementations. So that's been actually a really big focus of my career, and definitely over on the labor law side, a lot around benefit law, especially in the era of COVID, has been a lot of fun to keep up with all of that. So I do stay plugged in from a labor law standpoint on the benefit side.
Great. Well, that's excellent. Well, I mean, we definitely will steer you in the right direction of finding a faculty member that can utilize your expertise and come in and speak to the class. What's great about, speaking to the students and the way I've done in the past is that kind of my own personal story, right? I just tell them my journey almost to JMU, and of course, post JMU, and then also talk about, because a lot of them, at least the classes I've spoken to, are really interested in understanding once they leave the university, right, how to navigate the real world.
Yeah.
Right. How do they get the experience they're looking for? How do they sort of walk through the different levels of opportunity in different organizations? So telling your path and your story helps. But I also think it's helpful for you to tell also the challenges you've had, because a lot of them really want to know what's the reality, right? Once you have the degree, right, you are an HR management, graduate, then you get into your first HR job. What does that look like? Now, we know times have changed, and so technology, as you know, is important, and I think that's why you're focusing in on it, and maybe help them understand how they can be better prepared when they transition, or how they can be prepared to find the right opportunity. Because I think a lot of the students are still, reading textbooks and watching YouTube and think that that's how you figure it out. And I think there's some insight you can provide to them that gives them a realistic perspective about how to navigate that. So I know when I've spoken to classes, I've been real about that part, because I think a lot of the students, in college these days have been in a bubble, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
And I think when they get into the real world, they realize it's a little more challenging than expected. So the more prepared they can be. And, I think what you'll find, of course, you've got a child at JMU, so the culture has not changed that much. There's this core sort of culture at JMU that I think most universities don't have. Good people, smart, but also very kind. And so I think, coming back, you'll see that still integrated into the DNA of the students on campus right now. And I think telling your story and helping guide them. And I find when I'm speaking to a class, I try to have like, what's one or two nuggets I want them to walk away with.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them, have ADD, let's be honest, right there. They're on their phones, so having it really clear and simple helps. And I think show and tell is great. Anything that you can bring to show and tell them, it keeps them engaged, it keeps them focused, and it keeps everybody sort of involved. And I think if you're talking about recruiting, it could be a good way for you to get a preview as to who's out there talent-wise, and where you might find some new talent, or even if it's not in your organization, where you can direct them in places where they may be a good fit for their background. So I think it's always a great way to go back and provide it to them for sure. Yeah.
Jen, you have such a rich background in three very different lanes of healthcare, tech, and higher ed. One of the things that I found in working with my professor partners is identifying where in their coursework my experience could connect, right? So it's taking the theoretical that the students are learning in class and bringing it to life with the real world experience. And that's a really good way of connecting. So in us connecting you back to some of these professors, that'd be a good question to ask, is just, what's your coursework look like for this year? And then as you listen to that, maybe you can even say, you know what, I've got something that's very relevant for this, and kind of plug yourself in. The professors are so open to, weaving us in and out of their courses. One of the other things to consider is that if they are teaching a class and it has, 3 sections, you may end up being, zooming in or coming in for a series of classes just to make sure that all the students get the same lecture experience. So that could be a possibility, but they're very flexible on that. I have found that in telling your story, the students really open up to asking a lot of questions. And so you end up not only using up classroom time, but 2 ways that they want to stay connected with you is, 1, after class, They're going to hang out and they're going to form a line and they're going to ask you all of the questions that they might have been shy to ask in class. So be prepared to stay a little late. And then the other thing is LinkedIn. They'll want to connect with you on LinkedIn and talk to you about that. So overall, it's fun. And, you know, we don't do it every day. At least I don't, Darrell. I don't know about you, but
yeah, I don't know. I don't either. I don't
I touch in and, you know, there are a couple professors that I work really well with, and it makes a lot of sense to continue to support them in that capacity. If your company ends up being a company that wants to recruit from JMU, you know, these are opportunities for them to get connected, not only in the class, but, you know, through our career services. So again, once you get plugged in, it's like, you know, Darrell and I are hoping to be the switchboard operators, right? At least one of a large team to continue to get that network connected to the university, because it's not a lot of time, but it does make a huge difference.
Well, and I was going to ask about the time commitment. So what does that look like for you two, and how much time are you spending, and is it large blocks of time, and is it sporadic? Just looking for a sense of how that looks.
Yep. Go ahead, Darrell.
Yeah, well, I'm a little different. I'm on a couple of different boards at JMU, so it's a little more than normal. But I think as a speaker, I think the time is pretty simplistic. It's prepare for your speaking engagement, speak, and then any post correspondence you want. So I don't see a lot of time involved. I mean, if you want to do something annually where you want to speak every fall, you can work with certain professors and faculty members to do that and keep it simple. Or if you want to get more involved in one of the boards or get more engaged, then there's opportunity there too. So, I mean, I think there's the good thing about JMU, there's so many people in that ecosystem that would love to welcome your support. If you really want to be fully engaged, there's no shortage of places to go to do that. So.
Absolutely. I would say, you know, if you are looking at classroom speaking, it could be as little as a one-hit thing, right? Yeah. So they'll take as little amount of time as you're willing to give and as much amount of time as you're willing to give. That's what I've learned. So if you can only, you know, commit to doing one class, that might be it, right? Or one function, because a lot of times they'll host after hours things as well. So that might be another way. There are groups on campus, women in business, there's, you know, honor societies within management that people are interested in. I think SHRM has a group on campus as well. So that might be something that you're definitely going to be plugged in with quickly.
Oh, it's good that they still have that.
Yeah.
I had that back when I was there. So it's nice to see it still exists.
Yeah, so we'll get you connected that way. But like Darrell said, it's as little or as much as you want. You know, if you commit to a board, there's a little bit more work. There's at least quarterly meetings via Zoom, and then live meetings during homecoming week. But it's whatever your schedule will allow and whatever your interest is. They'll be happy to accept that.
Oh, that's good to know.
Well, and I think for Jen, you know, because you've got a child at the university, you also can plan it when you want to go visit your child, if it's parents' weekend or homecoming. And then it makes it really easy for you to do. Just come in a little earlier if you can and speak to a couple classes. And so it doesn't seem like it's taking any more additional time than it would for you just to go see your child there. So
yeah. Yeah, and what's cool about this group here is we're all class of 90s. Right. And so we are seeing a lot of the children of the class of 90s now engaged in the university. And so to be able to have the parents come back is very special. I mean, it's a full circle opportunity. And I think this is probably one of the few times in the university's history that we can really recall this level of engagement, because in the past, you know, we didn't see the people coming back as often, and now we do. And so, and JMU, now that we've made R2 status and we've reached the Sun Belt for athletics, there's no stopping us now. So we're ready to get more people engaged.
Yeah.
All right, well, if we've answered all the questions, I just wanted to put out a couple of email addresses. People can contact me at tfox@foxparadigm, PARADIGM.com. And I'll be happy to take any questions and redirect. And Darrell, I don't know if you have an email address that you want to give, or just LinkedIn, whatever's easiest.
LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach out to me. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So LinkedIn, and it's Darrell, who is with the branch out group.
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. And thank you again, Jen, for your interest. And we hope to see more alums serving back at JMU. And we'll certainly see you down there in the College of Business, Jen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today.
All right,
You're
thanks, Jen.
welcome.
All right.